Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. I'm David Jones. I'm with Jared Woodfill, and we have three guests today to talk about Veterans Matters. Carl Salazar is with the Office of Veterans Affairs with the City of Houston. Judge Marc Carter runs and manages the drug court with the district courts of Harris County, and Jim Moriarty is a Vietnam veteran and a member of the Gold Star family, as I understand it. So welcome all of you. Mr. Salazar, start with you. Why does the city need a Veterans Affairs department when we've got such a huge infrastructure at the VA? I mean, what do you do that separates you from the VA?
So the office started probably 9 years ago, probably going on 10 years ago. I've been in the office for just about 4, and the reason they started it is because we have such a large population of veterans here. There's, in the neighborhood of 300,000 or more in Harris County alone. Most people are surprised by that number. It's such a high number. The reason we exist is to help people connect and know about resources. So the difference between us and the VA is the VA provides benefits, resources in-house, and we are the people who kind of tell other people about what resources are there at the VA, but also in other places out in the community. There's quite a bit, nonprofits and otherwise, who are doing things for veterans, and it's impossible to know what all those things are. So our office was started to be a communication point to tell people about what those resources are for vets and their families.
And the Returning Vet Initiative is the transition from military to civilian life?
Right, and that was the whole idea. It was, again, this predates me, but after Katrina, Houston was so good at settling people from New Orleans in Houston, we thought, well, let's do something for our veterans and help them settle in Houston after they leave service. So the Returning Veterans Initiative was a collaboration between the United Way, Harris County, and the City of Houston, and the way it sort of manifested was by the creation of our office.
Okay. Judge Carter, I hate to put this question to you this way, but
Sure.
You're dealing with the vets who are criminals, right?
Well, they're justice-involved veterans. All right.
That's very nicely put.
Well, yeah. I mean, and that's what it is, because most of the veterans that we see, the underlying issue is going to be mental health and drug addictions, and so that's behavior that can be changed through, of course, patience and treatment, and so. The idea behind the Veterans Court is to get them the treatment that they need, and again bring them back to the community as law-abiding, productive citizens that they were, when they joined the military, and also to get back to those core values that you have as a soldier. I say soldier. I know you're a Marine, but I was a soldier. And you have these core values that you live by, and it becomes a part of you. And so the idea is to get these men and women back to that point where they have that self-pride, self-esteem, and become productive citizens. And we've been very successful at it.
Jim Moriarty, it is my opinion, and see if you share it, that the war in Afghanistan is just not going well. We're still losing people. We were still bombing Afghan units. Innocent American soldiers are being killed by friendly fire. It's 16 years. Isn't that enough?
We invaded Afghanistan for a seemingly legitimate purpose almost 17 years ago. We had Afghanistan won. Our troops had Afghanistan won by January 1st, 2002. For reasons that are really beyond me, our government chose to continue that war and then move into a proxy war, a made-up war in Iraq during that same time period. And we're still in Afghanistan today. And I will be in D.C. for the awarding of a Medal of Honor 2 weeks from now. And I will be asking questions of our highest leaders. What the hell are we doing in Afghanistan?
Who's getting a Medal of Honor?
There's a guy named Gary Michael Rose, who was a Vietnam-era medic, Army medic, and I've been involved with his efforts to have him appropriately awarded a Medal of Honor, and he will be awarded that Medal of Honor on Monday, October 23rd.
That's outstanding.
Excellent. Well, Mr. Salazar, let me ask you a couple of questions because I find your office fascinating. If I'm a veteran and I come to you, is there a certain service that you provide that most vets wouldn't be aware of that you could educate our audience on today?
Yeah, there are, like I said, I think it's there for some time. There have been a lot of organizations who are doing something for veterans. There are organizations that help veterans with employment, for example, and that's their part-time job, and they do other things as well, so they have like one veteran component. And then there are other organizations that are all about veterans all the time. Most of them aren't very good at outreach, or a lot of them aren't very good at outreach, including the VA, who has been around and the biggest, they're the biggest veteran resource in any community, but they're not really good at outreach. That's just not what they do. And so our office, whether it's a family member or a veteran himself or herself that calls us up, we can listen to what they need and we can connect them to any number of resources. It's pretty old-fashioned to think that people are going to call us on the phone and we're going to answer the phone and actually give them some responses, but that's what we do. There are some, if you look at our website, we'll have some links on there, but it's a changing landscape.
What are some of the most common questions you get asked here locally?
There are some real hard ones, and it's very specific. But there are also some areas that are kind of FAQs, right? So makes me think we should probably put an FAQ section.
I like that idea.
But people, veterans young and old, lose their discharge paperwork, and they're not sure how to get their discharge paperwork. So they ask us how to get their DD-214, which is the form that you get when you leave service. A lot of people lose that and they need it to get benefits, so they ask simple questions like that. And then there's more difficult questions when a loved one loses somebody suddenly who's a veteran and they have no idea how to bury their veteran. And they ask us, for advice on how to connect with the cemetery. And so we know who the people to call are, and that's pretty much what we do. We help. And so we have a small staff. We answer the phone, and we get emails all the time. And that's what we do. For veterans who are moving to Houston for the very first time, we partnered with an organization called Combine Arms, and even before Combine Arms was the Lone Star Veterans Association. So, we're trying to do as a society a much better job at helping people before there's a problem. That way they don't fall in, they don't show up in Judge Carter's court. And then, we're trying to do a much better job than what we did during the Vietnam era when people came home and there was no help. There was nothing for them. So we're trying to connect people to employment or other kinds of benefits so that we really want them to get into the swing of things and become members of Houston's community and then never need help again, hopefully. But if they do, we're here for them for other things as well. But
that sounds like a very valuable service too, and I want to thank you for doing that and what all the great work y'all are doing. I've heard some wonderful things. Judge, for you, who I've known for a long time, first of all, let me thank you for your service and to our country. And I know you to be an outstanding judge, and the judge and I have known each other personally for many years. How does the Veterans Court, I'll call it, how do you distinguish that from just your traditional, everyday, run-of-the-mill criminal district court case?
Well, as you know, I have essentially two dockets. I have the 228th, my regular district court docket, and I also have on top of that the Veterans Court, and it's a probation program, and it's distinguished from other probation in the sense that the contact that I have with the probationer is like every other week. At the beginning, and then the contact will go to once a month for about a 2-year period. And so there's a lot of hands-on by me. I'm holding them accountable, and being a former Army officer, I run that courtroom like I would a company command, and so it's a really interesting dynamic that we have going, and it creates a kind of a mutual respect. We refer to each other as sir, ma'am, very formal in that sense. And again, the idea is to pursue success. You know, nobody, that's the end game, is to get them working. And we work with Combined Arms in the city of Houston, and his outreach program started about the same time that the Veterans Court program, and we kind of did this thing together, very much so. Had a lot of help from the mayor's office. But so it's in a regular probation, generally the only time a probationer is going to see me is if they're in trouble. Okay, but in the Veterans Court, it's non-adversarial in that sense. They come in and they see me, and we do a checkup, just an accountability, a checkup. And again, that's just one of the reasons why the program and similar programs like the drug courts and mental health courts are successful, because of that accountability that we require.
Well, so for instance, if a vet is accused of committing a crime, are there, or let's just say it's a serious crime, a murder,
Yes.
or something of that nature,
Well,
would that not be in that court? That would be in a typical, your typical district docket?
That's a completely
Okay.
different animal.
Right.
All right. So for the first thing is that the cases that we have are cases that are appropriate for probation. So because you're a veteran, you're not getting any, extra bump or anything like that. It really comes down to, is the case appropriate for probation? And if it is, or community supervision. And if it is, then what are the resources that we have that will make this person successful? And it's the same concept that we should and do use in drug cases, drug possession, drug use, and mental health. What resources do we have that's going to make them successful? Because at the end of the day, it makes our community safer. And there's just a chain of events that come from a person being successful, as opposed to going to prison.
Right. And Jim, I'm sure you're aware, as we all are, of the many suicides by veterans. Some of it, if not most of it, who knows, linked to post-traumatic stress syndrome. Do you know whether or not the VA is doing anything about that, and the second thing is, since you were actually in the Marines in Vietnam and know something about war experiences, should the military be preventive with the soldiers that they have in country as they experience the horrific things that we know they see, in terms of anticipating PTSD?
You've asked a variety of questions. Let me see if I can focus on them. I was at a program for family survivors, Gold Star families in Montana 2 weeks ago, and I had this fantasy, this image, that it was mostly kids that were killed in Iraq or Afghanistan in combat
related. Mm-hmm.
And turned out it was about 35 families, all Gold Star families. There were 2 of us who lost our sons in combat. There was perhaps 10 or 12 that lost their sons or daughters in IEDs, and there was about 20 who lost their sons or daughters in suicide. Wow. And what you got to remember, and this just depresses me to the core. In my war, if you survived the war, you came back and your body was fine. In these wars, that's not true at all. I flew as a helicopter door gunner in Vietnam, and I carried, a 1.5 or 2 pound flight suit and a pistol belt, some ammo. I wasn't carrying 10 pounds of stuff. I represent Marine veterans today who've been medically discharged from the Marine Corps. They're jumping on and off of trucks. They're carrying 80, 90 pounds of flak jackets and equipment and armament and ammo. And our bodies aren't designed for that. And not only that, but one of the chief ways that our enemies are killing us in Iraq and Afghanistan are by bombs, by what they call improvised explosive devices. So now you've got not only PTSD, you've got their knees and their backs going out, you've got traumatic brain injury. Mm-hmm. It's a whole different deal than the PTSD of my generation. And we have taken an entire, we're now into our 2nd decade of these wars, and now going on to 2 generations of kids that we're just wearing out. I meet with and I stay in close contact with the Special Forces troops that my son fought with, and they're some of the most extraordinarily professional and competent service people I've ever seen in my life. They're our warriors, but we're wearing them out. And I've been connected with the Marine Corps for more than 50 years, and I thought I was sophisticated about what we're doing and not doing. And I asked these kids, I served 3 tours of duty in Vietnam, and I thought I was a stud. I'm nobody compared to these kids today. My son had 3 deployments. Many of the people that he served with had 4, 5, 8, 10, 12 deployments. And we're hated in Afghanistan, we're hated in Iraq. Our kids are being blown up by these terribly effective IEDs. They never get a chance to fight back. They never get a chance to engage the enemy. And if they survive, they come back with PTSD that far eclipses anything that my generation saw, and traumatic brain injuries.
Your experience in Vietnam, having served 3 tours, is really more of an exception than the rule. I mean, most of that generation served 1 tour. Marines, I think you guys did 13 months, and Army did 12, I believe.
Well, I was in our country's combat force. The United States Marine Corps is contrasted to the Army or the Air Force.
Yeah, that's right. I know. There's always a little bit of that going on.
Marine
You guys did
Marine
12 months. We did
exceptionalism.
You
13
guys
months.
had to do that extra month.
And Jim, and let me ask you something about that. Jim, first of all, thank you for your service and the commitment of your family. So we are here today and can have this type of conversation because of the commitment you and your son made to preserve the freedoms we're enjoying today. So I want to start by thanking you for that. And you said something I found very interesting. You talked about the rules of engagement. How have the rules of engagement changed over the past few years with these 2 different administrations that we've seen?
Well, to be kind and clear, our political leaders are idiots, and many of our military leaders are idiots. The basic concepts of warfare haven't changed in 2,000 years. And I just read yesterday was the 11-month anniversary of my son being killed, and the day before that was one of the anniversaries for the attack on Outpost Keating. Outpost Keating, I've met the father of one of the boys that died at Keating, and it's down in the middle of a valley, down with mountains, high ground on both sides.
It's not a tactical position to be in.
No, it's a great tactical position to be in if you're the enemy.
If you're the enemy.
Yeah, I mean, they were in great shape because they had the high ground, we had the low ground.
Right.
We didn't have helicopter support. Now this was, and I will tell you in all candor, I don't care whether it's a Democratic administration or it's a Republican administration. They've all been idiots. They took our kids and they put them down there in this little bitty hole in this valley. There's a town next door. There's no helicopter support. There's no timely
One route
fixed
in
wing
and one
support.
route out.
One route in and out, and we lost people going in and out because they don't have roads as we see them.
Yep.
Our troops knew that they were going to be attacked before they were attacked, and 300 to 400 Taliban decided that they would come in. They fought the Taliban fought a brilliant tactical battle, and we probably killed 200 of them, but we lost 7 or 8 of our kids.
And those
for
are the only ones we care about.
no legitimate reason, no legitimate purpose. We did not add any value whatsoever to the world, except we trained another generation of people who hate Americans.
Well, you said something about our military.
I was just saying, it's that story all over again, from Vietnam, the hill that you take and then you leave, they take it, and then we come back. I mean, it's the same story all over again.
Right, and I saw every episode of the Ken Burns series, and we would be truly negligent if we didn't bring that up, given it was a PBS matter. And 3 takeaways, and each of you can discuss each of these broad takeaways that I got from it. One is the overwhelming sense of grief and loss, still suffering from people who were in that war and are suffering today. And the second thing I took from that series was how much our civilian and military commanders were lying to their troops about the possibility of success, and were lying to the public about the same thing. And then finally, I took from it that there was a genuine love of country from the Moriartys of the world who were in there taking those hills and giving them back and going back and taking them again. So please explore those themes, if you will.
I would, if you don't mind me jumping in, and I want to, probably not qualified to talk about a lot about what happened in Vietnam, but I know on that third point, one thing that I have not seen all the episodes, but I've seen a number of them, and one thing that I took away from what I've seen so far is, you know, the people who went and fought, whether they were drafted or whether they volunteered on their own, were every bit as patriotic and warriors as we had fighting for us in World War II. The difference being primarily is a sort of storytelling that happened afterwards about what happened. There's very good reasons that we you know, pay homage to the World War II veterans and what happened in World War II, because it certainly changed the world. But the warriors, in my mind, were no different than the warriors that fought in World War II.
You're taking notes, Jim. What are you going to tell us?
Let me cover a couple of things. That I would describe the love of country business slightly differently. People don't volunteer to go serve in the military then or now strictly out of love of country. Most of our warriors, most of our troops are
Trying to
men,
get an education, trying to get
young
money
men
for school.
and young women. And they join the military for a variety of reasons. The truth is, one of the few remaining great institutions is our military. And they do the same thing today that they did with my generation and they did with World War II, is they'll take lower middle class kids, upper lower class kids, solid middle class kids, put them in a mix, give them an education, give them training, give them meaning. And so it's a subtle difference that it's not so much love of country as it is love of their fellow soldiers. They would die for their fellow soldiers, and that was true then, and that's true today. And my big takeaway from Vietnam, I look back and I think, you know, I got there in 1966 and I stayed until 1968. I knew and we knew we were going to lose the war then, because while we didn't really understand the big picture issues, we knew that we weren't fighting the kinds of battles or doing the kinds of things to win. McNamara was in the Department of Defense. You had the General Westmoreland, who was the commanding general in Vietnam, and both of them, in my view, were completely incompetent. McMaster, who's presently in Trump's administration, wrote a brilliant book about it. And the reality is that we decided as a nation after World War II that we would support the French in taking back their colony in Indochina. We ignored the fact that Ho Chi Minh was actively protecting OSS people. We empowered the Japanese, who the Vietnamese hated and the Koreans hated. We empowered them after World War II to keep a lid on things, and we got involved in a war that we had no business getting involved in.
We got a 10-second question, 10-second answer from everybody before we wrap up. Should transgendered people be allowed in the military or not?
Of course.
You?
Yeah. No, I don't think that there's any evidence to show that they are detrimental to the service, as far as I know. There are some issues though that you know, I'm not sure that I totally agree. Like I think that a person that's transgendered should be able to go into the military just like someone, male or a female, you know. And I say as long as you can shoot straight, it's fine.
Okay, Carl, he just took your time. So thank you, Carl Salazar and Judge Carter, Jim Moriarty, friend. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you again next week on Red, White, and Blue.